Hi, welcome to another video. As always, my name's Nick, and this video is about what sort of books you should start off reading to learn a language. I mentioned in a previous video how I'm learning a language completely for free by reading books and watching series and playing video games. Now, if you haven't watched that video, then I would highly suggest going back and watching that. But if you have, then yeah, you already know why you're here. So, when can you actually start reading a book in your target language? Now that is going to depend a lot on how much you actually feel like you need to understand when you're reading. So some people feel like they need to understand every single thing that's going on. And for those people, you would need a very good foundation and you would need to look up a lot of words. That's just how it's going to be. For me, I feel like if I can understand the main gist of it by looking up a few words, then that's perfect for me. If I can look up maybe one or two words every single chapter, that's perfect for me. I don't need to understand every single word, but if me looking up one or two words every chapter is enough for me to actually understand what's going on in the story, then that's perfect for me. If you don't feel like you need to understand much and you're just grasping like a few small details, then yeah, you can basically start off right off the bat. You're not going to be learning that much, but you're going to be learning increasingly more as you go on. And it's probably going to be a very interesting process for you. That just doesn't work for me, so that's why I'm not doing it. If you're starting up right from the scratch, you can actually start reading. But what I would suggest then is I would have a look at the books that you're starting to read, and I would make a list of words that are going to be important. This works especially well if you've already read the book that you're going to be reading in maybe your own native language or another language that you're proficient in. If you haven't read it before, then yeah, you're going to have to do a bit of research. That is what I would suggest, because then you would understand important words right from the get-go, and you would understand a few more words as you keep on reading, just based off the fact that yeah, you know those important words that keep showing up. And I would always recommend at least knowing the basic structure of a language before you start reading a book. Otherwise, at least I wouldn't enjoy it. Not in the slightest. Now, what I would actually suggest in order to make this process a bit easier is to start off by reading manga. Now, manga is great because it's an engaging story that is fast-paced, a lot faster-paced than you would find in books, for instance. And yeah, you generally find them that so engaging that you don't want to stop. And there are way fewer and way shorter like dips in the action. At least in my experience, I found myself basically just wanting to keep on reading. What I started off doing was I read Rave Master and Seven Deadly Sins. Now, Rave Master is amazing. If you haven't read it, I highly suggest it. Even if you're not learning a language, it's just that amazing. It's my favorite manga of all time. It's a bit old in the same way that, yeah, it wasn't finished, or I believe it finished right around the time when I was like 12 or so. But it's been a few years. It's still holding up, at least in my opinion, and I would highly suggest reading it. Now, the beautiful thing about manga is that you don't really have to focus on learning a lot of descriptions, because you're seeing the images, and the mangas therefore don't have to include all those descriptions, which makes it a lot easier for you to focus on what actually matters, meaning the action, what's actually going on in the story. That is why I would suggest reading manga in the beginning. Now, I didn't initially do this. I tried starting off with Percy Jackson, which is my favorite book series, and it's a book series that I've read probably 7 times at this point, maybe even more. I've read it that many times, and it proved to be too difficult for me, at least in the beginning. Percy Jackson is, I would actually suggest it as a great book for you to start off when you're starting off reading books. I would just suggest starting off with mangas and then moving on to books like Percy Jackson. Now, what's great about Percy Jackson is that, aside from the fact that, yeah, it's a great book, it is a book series written in the first-person point of view, which means that the main character is also the one telling the story. Now, what that means is that the main character will only tell you what he actually sees, how he sees the world. He won't tell you everything else that's going on. He will not be focusing, therefore, on that many descriptions. You will still read a lot of descriptions, just not that many. Not the same amount that you will read from a book series where the narrator is just someone from outside of the story that actually knows everything that's going on, has every single bit of information, and is trying to help immerse you in the action by telling you everything and then giving you a complete image of what's actually going on. No, Percy Jackson is a simple book. It's written in the first person point of view, packed with action, and not that many descriptions. Still a lot more than you would have in the manga, but basically nothing compared to how many you would read in a book like Aragon, which is what I'm reading at the moment, which is written in the third person point of view. As a side note, Aragon is also a lot just more complex, and that also makes it more challenging. Those were my books, but I would always suggest, if you're starting off reading books, read books that are written in the first person point of view, and I would also suggest reading books that you've already read before. I've read Percy Jackson several times. I still enjoy it. I assume you also have books that like that. Now, the main benefit of doing this is that you actually know what's going on, and you know that you're going to enjoy the book, meaning, yeah, you'll be able to follow the action, you'll be able to follow what actually happens in the story a lot better, and you'll know right off the bat that you're actually enjoying the book, or you will actually enjoy the book. Because at least in my case, I spend the first maybe 50 pages deciding whether or not I'm actually going to be enjoying this book. If I have to spend the first 50 pages reading a book to actually know whether or not I'll enjoy that book, then I don't want to have to do that in my target language, because I'm going to be reading a lot slower, and therefore the process is going to be taking me maybe 3 or 4 times as long when I'm trying to read new books in my target language. Therefore, why not just read the books that I already know that I'm going to enjoy, making the process that much more enjoyable, which is my main point when I'm studying. I'm trying to make the process as enjoyable as possible, which also leads to it being free. Now, you don't actually have to read the books that I've recommended, but I would suggest finding your own first person point of view books if you're reading fiction books. Now, you don't have to read fiction books. You can also read non-fiction books on interesting topics or stuff that you're trying to learn. And the great part about reading books about things that you're trying to learn is you'll encounter words that will be repeated a lot. Therefore, you'll get to know them, you'll understand the words very well, and it will probably be engaging for you, just based off the fact that you have an interest in this and you actually want to learn. Now, what I would suggest to supplement this is I would suggest watching videos on the same topic. That will give you a lot of listening practice, which is always beneficial, and it will give you the practice of just filtering out the information that you can't understand, and you'll be able to pick up a few words while not having to pay that close attention and not having to use that much of your focus. So it's a good activity to just slow down a bit and then maybe learn a little bit. That will conclude this video on how I would suggest starting off reading books in a foreign language. I'm planning to do a video on how to use video games for learning a language and what sort of video games might be good to start off with. So stay tuned for that if that's something that you're interested in. And also, if you have anything else that you would like for me to either answer or make a video on, you can leave it in the comments, or you can send me a DM on my Instagram, which has the same name as this. The link for that will also be in the description, and I basically think that's it. As always, best of luck studying. Neck out.